Welcome to Intersection Magazine podcast. This week we are recording from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and this is the second day of engagement after an extremely busy day yesterday. Today we have a guest who's an important part of the Tanzania technology innovation ecosystem. He is an investment specialist. His name is Salum Awadh. I met him or contacted him through interaction with the Tanzania Startup Association when I contacted them asking them for who some important people would be to interact with in the Tanzania ecosystem, and they recommended him. And when I reached out to him, he was swift to respond, and after quite a lot of back and forth in terms of trying to get a meeting here and there, we finally managed to secure a space with him. So we're excited about some ideas we are going to talk about with him. We hope that you can benefit from some of these ideas, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you very much. So first, before we go into the interview with Mr. Salum Awadh, let's give us a rough idea what Kotani Pay does as I suppose as our sponsor. Give us a rough idea what your services are and what you do in the fintech space. CEO Felix Macharia.
Thank you, Nicholas. So we are a venture-backed blockchain fintech focused on on-ramp off-ramp, meaning the movement from local currencies to digital currencies. And because we're an infrastructure business, we tend to have a lot of a wide range of customers, from wallets to exchanges to real-world businesses. So we have three main products. We have the USSD wallet that's mainly used by NGOs when it comes to cash transfer of stable coins to local currency. We have an API that's a unified API, meaning that it connects to local payment channels, mobile money in mobile money countries, banks, and fintechs. And then we have a stablecoin settlement solution. Stablecoin settlement solution is mostly focused on real-world businesses that have difficulty in accessing dollars. So probably know by now that Africa suffers from dollar shortage. We use the dollar for most of our imports. And so we give businesses an alternative of continuing with their business by accessing regulated stablecoins like USDC and widely used stablecoins like USDT. So this is, one of the ways we help oil companies, real estate companies, import-export companies to continue running their business, even in times of difficult dollar scarcity.
Okay, thank you very much, Felix. So, Mr. Awadh, please tell us a little bit about yourself. I looked up your profile and did a bit of research about you. Found out that you're heavily invested in the technology and innovation ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm more invested in finance and investment in the support of the technology and other tech ecosystems. So my name is Salum Awadh. I'm Tanzanian, and I'm a CEO of SSC Group, which is a diversified financial services outfit based out of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And my work in the finance and investment space it's been, of course, more than a decade now. So we work to support different players in the market, from startups, corporates, government agencies, multinational companies, investors, in doing businesses in Tanzania, investing in other spaces around that. But also wear a heart as a civil government public servant, I would say, not civil servant as such, that I worked for one of the government agencies since September last year.
Okay. Tell us a little bit what you do for that government agency.
So last year I was appointed by the president to lead one of the government agencies in the cultural sector. What we do is we manage the serious business on behalf of the government. So what we do is, as a serious board, we buy all types of cereals from farmers. You should know Tanzania is pretty much an agricultural economy. So we buy cereals from farmers. We have 7 factories across the country, so we process, we do value addition, we package, and then we sell locally and export in the nearby markets, including Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, and DRC.
Okay. I need to know a little bit more about your SSC group in terms of structure. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so SSC Group is structured as a holding company. Beneath it, we have businesses in 5 different verticals. So one is we do advisory, strategy advisory, where we have the SSC Capital as our main brand. Then we have investment banking business, where we do asset and wealth management for private clients. And then, of course, we have a fintech line of business as well, where we have a mobile app that simplifies halal investing in the space of Islamic finance. But we just launched an equity crowdfunding platform as part of our fintech business model, which will be in the market soon. But in addition to that, we also do a lot of work in the education and training space, because as you know, financial literacy is pretty much very low across Africa, including Tanzania. So we're trying to reduce that and give people more literacy in how they do and make their finance and investment decisions. And lastly, as part of the group, we are moving into insurance now, where we have a small insurance outfit that we just launched.
Okay. How important is faith in your personal faith in how you do business?
For me, faith is everything. So I don't do stuff that contradicts with my faith, if I may say. So what I do is I make sure that everything that I do, everything that I believe in, everything that I enforce, the type of transactions that I do, the type of relationships I build with people, must not contradict with what I believe. So with this fairness and all that, which is centered around what I believe in.
Okay. Now, in the profile, there was a figure that was quoted, about $400 million US. Is that how much has come through the SSC group, or can you highlight a little bit about that?
So pretty much that. So our main business to date at SSC Capital has been advisory and capital raising. So you raise money for companies. So $400 million is the total value to date of the value of the transactions in terms of advisory that we have done. But on top of that, the amount of capital that we have raised for other businesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, some people may have a bit of difficulty understanding the different, for example, the difference between private equity, venture capital, angel investing.
Yeah.
Can you help me with that, please?
Yeah, so the difference of 3 actually is tied up to 3 things. The level where that is done, the amount which they invest in, and the level of risk that they take. So angel investing is pretty much the lowest level of the private equity ecosystem, where people invest their own money into early stage, high risky, potentially high scalable opportunities in the startup ecosystem. So they use their own money, but they invest less money. So looking at the 3 metrics that I mentioned, an angel investor is the one who takes the highest risk, invests the lowest amount, and of course invests his own money. And venture capital is a level above angel investor, where first of all they don't invest their own money. So a venture capitalist will raise money from other investors for the purpose of investing in other people's businesses. They take a little bit less risky than if you were to compare to an angel investor, because they will invest in a company that has some traction, which of course is the growth level that they want to scale further. And the amount they would invest, of course, is pretty much more higher than what an angel investor will invest in. And a private equity, this is pretty much more the highest level of venture capital, or the private equity ecosystem in general, where they will invest more money. They will invest pretty much more into mature companies, and they might not necessarily, because when you look at an angel investor and venture capital, they tend to invest for minority stake in companies. Okay. But if you look at private equity, it could involve buyout, so they might buy the entire company, restructure the company, take it public, and make their money. So that's how we would differentiate 3 levels of private equity.
Okay. Do you have any comments regarding, for example, this Silicon Valley Bank collapse? Did you feel any of those effects on your local startups in the ecosystem, or is your funding more based in the continent?
No, of course, Silicon Valley was a bank used by many VCs and many startups as well, as we know.
Okay.
There's been a tendency in the past few years for many startups in Africa to set businesses outside Africa, in the US. And of course, they would use Silicon Valley Bank as their bank of choice. And of course, Silicon Valley as well would also offer some additional debt financing to some of these startups in addition to what VCs will do. So the collapse had that impact because now you fill that gap of additional debt financing to some of these startups, number one. Number two, of course, some of the VCs that were cutting checks in Africa had to hold on to that because some were affected. So that, of course, would reduce the amount of investments that come into Africa. Of course, not the only factor, the bank will also be a contributing factor what we see now. If you look at the data for venture capital investment in Africa for the first half of 2023, it was there's a decline of 54% of deals if you compare with the same period last year. So of course there are other factors now with what's happening in the developed world, but that of course will be a contributing factor. So you would see that as some of the effects that we see, of course, many parts of Africa. Tanzania, not necessarily, because if you look at the deal count, deal size, and amount of investment that have been done in Africa, in Tanzania, the impact wasn't that much, because 75% to 80% of all VC deals are done in 4 countries, and Tanzania is not one of them. So any impact on VC ecosystem globally wouldn't have the same impact on Tanzanian ecosystem.
Okay. Now, you mentioned before your work for the cereal board. Is agri-tech a big industry? Is it an important part of the technology ecosystem?
Agriculture is the big sector.
Okay.
Agri-tech is not, unfortunately. So 27% of the economy in Tanzania is agri. 67% of the labor force in Tanzania is employed in agri. 65% to 70% of all the raw materials going to our factories in Tanzania come from agri. So you would see the contribution of agri to the economy is huge. But unfortunately, for unknown reasons, agri-tech has not been able to catch up the pace where the host industry has taken. But we don't see much in terms of agri-tech in Tanzania, which is unfortunate. So fintech still leads, just like in many other parts of Africa.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I suppose I'm curious in terms of your interaction with the government. Let me ask the other question in terms of the banking infrastructure. Is there some form of preparation to prepare local banks to be doing things like what Silicon Valley Bank was offering to local investors? What are the percentages like in terms of how much local banks are investing in startups in Tanzania?
No, not really. First of all, the Silicon Valley Bank is a different structure when it comes to banks, unlike the banks that we see here. So majority of banks in Tanzania are commercial banks where they use people's deposits to lend money to other businesses. And when you're using people's deposits, regulated by the central bank, there isn't much you can do. So they cannot play with our money. Investing in startups is a risk avenue, and then you need to use risk capital to do that. And banks, of course, don't have that. So you don't really expect, and we wouldn't blame banks not to do that, because banks are not structured to do that. This is the space for other sources of financing, which you just talked about, the likes of angel investing, venture capital, private equity. Of course, banks will always come in when the startup now has grown to a level where they have strong cash flows, they've built some assets. That's when the banks will also come in, and then because they know you're secured, they can lend you money, they can see cash flows. So banks will also come at a later stage, but not necessarily in the early stage. But overall, if you're looking at the SME, which is a bigger part of startups, startup being just a subset of that, I think it's close to 20% of all lending that banks do in Tanzania goes to SMEs.
Okay. Now, the question I had, the previous question was about government's involvement in in for example, the support of those in producing cereals, for example, that you talked about in your work there. I want to know a little bit about the relationship in terms of, for example, in Uganda, we have sometimes we get messages in terms of, okay, guys, this is what we're going to invest in. There's a market for, say, for example, vanilla, or say there's a market for coffee, or there's been a disaster in Indonesia, so our coffee, there's a potential for our coffee selling. So then you get a group of people deciding, let's plant this certain product, and then 5 years down the road, the prices goes down. So do you have those kinds of challenges in Tanzania?
So in cereals, no, not necessarily, because we pretty much consume a lot in terms of cereals. I think we all know ugali, which is a staple food in Tanzania.
Okay.
So whatever that we produce in terms of corn or maize, we consume a lot locally. So the market, you just have an immediate market for your cereals. But of course, if you look at the neighboring countries, Kenya of course consumes a lot of ugali as well, and they import a lot of maize from Tanzania, which of course gives you another opportunity for your market. The only thing that, and of course the demand and the supply of cereals, especially rice, wheat, and maize, which are our core cereals, have been constant, honestly, for many years. The only challenge that you mentioned about is for these new crops which tend to pop up, like what we've seen with vanilla. So vanilla has been a crop which has been on and off. There's hype in the market for people to produce vanilla, and then few years down the road, and then there's pretty much no market for vanilla. And the reason is, so Madagascar is the leading producer of vanilla in Africa. So if anything happens to Madagascar, we know they are usually susceptible to a lot of things naturally. And then, of course, the production of vanilla will go down. And then that, will, of course, will push demand for many other countries to produce vanilla. And then when Madagascar recovers back to its position, and then nobody buys vanilla anywhere except for Madagascar. So everybody gets stuck with their vanilla. So I think that would happen to vanilla. But in terms of cereals, we as a government agency, we of course, our vision is to be the largest off-taker of all the cereals which are produced in the country. Last year, before I was appointed for this position, the budget for our board was 50 billion Tanzanian shillings. When we came in, we have tripled the budget to 150 billion. And the reason is just to be able to buy more and more from farmers, so we can store, we can process, we can also, do price stabilization when food inflation goes down. Yeah.
In terms of your cereals, has there been any effect from, for example, the war in Ukraine?
Yeah, a lot, especially on wheat. We know Russia is one of the largest producers of wheat in the world, in Ukraine. So whatever that happened in Russia and Ukraine had a huge impact on wheat. So last year, for instance, we have a wheat processing factory as one of the businesses under the cereals board. And we operated pretty much below I think below 20% of its historical capacity, because we didn't have wheat. Tanzania consumes 1 million metric of tons and produces only 100,000 of that, only 10%. So we import 90% of the wheat that we consume. So anything that happened, for whatever reason, what happened in Russia and Ukraine had huge impact in terms of the supply of the 90% of the wheat that we consume. So as a result, our factory didn't work well, and we are bad hit as a country.
Okay. Thank you very much. You've helped shed quite a light on quite a number of areas: investment environment, the role of agriculture in the Tanzania sector, the economy. Of course, also the importance of you've talked about technology, you talked about agricultural technology and the lack thereof, even if the country is heavily dependent on agriculture. What excites you about the current technology environment and ecosystem?
Wow. Everybody says AI. Yeah, so one thing which I think is very positive and excites me is the idea that whether it's government agencies or corporates, are opening up now to explore technological solutions. Because I tell you one thing, it doesn't matter what you build. You can build whatever solutions that you have, whether it's blockchain solutions, whether it's AI, whatever that you build. If there's no uptake in the market for that, then it's useless. For me, I think the major off-takers are government agencies, security organs, corporates like banks, telcos, insurance companies. If they change their mindsets and start looking at these as potential solutions, instead of building in-house and work with startups that are building these solutions, for me, I think that's what excites me the most. So we see that. So the government is changing the policy environment. There's just a review now of the ICT policy in Tanzania. There are discussions now for startup policy in Tanzania. And then, of course, there's a huge partnership that we see between telcos, banks, and the startup ecosystem in terms of exploring these technological solutions which startups are building. So for me, I think that's what excites me. Otherwise, you can have a very rich ecosystem in terms of startups building all these solutions. But startups cannot sell to startups for them to take off. They need people with financial muscles to buy off some of the solutions that they're building, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's B2B solution that they built. And that's where I think I see a lot of excitement moving forward. So we see that. So banks, I remember one of the two largest banks in Tanzania just opened its API for startups in the fintech space to access it, which to me that would excite me. One of the telcos is partnering with one of the local companies and they launched an accelerator for startups in that space as well, which I think is another partnership which I think is exciting as well. And the government is open, it invites startups, and then we have the Startups Association now, where I think if it works well, will help drive all these innovations in technology moving to that level. Fintech space, of course, has always been exciting. If you follow up recently, the new report was published, I think just 2 weeks ago, which shows the population which is formally banked moved from 17% in Tanzania to 22% in 5 years. Only 5% jump, which to me, I think, is very low. But if you were to put a lot of emphasis on fintechs, that growth would have been triple of that size, and we would have more people covered by banking system in Tanzania and increase more people into bankability. You cannot change people's lives if they are not formally banked, trust me. And I think those are the areas which we might see a lot of other excitements moving forward.
Okay. One last question. We have the big four, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria in terms of attraction of investment. What lessons are you picking from the big four? Which country are you watching for ideas?
I think naturally Tanzania tends to look at Kenya, naturally, whether as a rival or as a peer. But we tend to look at Kenya immediately.
Okay.
I think it's the closest. If you look at the East African region, Kenya is the largest economy, Tanzania is the second. And then if you look at discussions, people are like, you know what, we can overtake Kenya. So you tend to look at Kenya in most times.
Okay.
So we look at Kenya, what is Kenya doing? What is Kenya doing in terms of the startup ecosystem, in terms of investing and all that. So we learn. One of the things which I think we learn from Kenya is in the space of talent. Okay. If you see Google, if it's Microsoft, opening offices in Kenya, not just because they love Kenyans, I think because they can have access to talent locally, which we still struggle to do. So I think one of the areas which we learn from them is that. But I think aggressiveness, not all Tanzania love what I say, but I think we are less aggressive if you compare to the likes of Kenya, Nigeria, in that space in terms of going for whatever that you want. But overall, I think the activeness of the ecosystem. If you go to Kenya today, you are most likely to bump into a demo day, a pitch day almost every week or every 2 weeks, which you rarely see in Tanzania. So we need to have that activeness in the market. But what the other thing that I've seen, especially in Nigeria, in Egypt, is the role of the diaspora community, who are coming back home, either to start businesses because they've built a lot of exposure and experiences in the first world, so they bring that back home, or in terms of investing, some of the remittances investing back home as angel investors and trying to bridge the financing gap, which you see especially for early stage startups. So these are some of the things which we really see in terms of what others are doing. Of course, the role of the government, to be very receptive, to be open-minded, and to accept that startup is the economy. Startup is a $3 trillion economy globally, so you need to open your hands and let these guys come in and do the work. So those are some of the things which we learn from these big four. In Kenya, because I think it's easy to relate. We speak the same language pretty much. Of course, we speak better Swahili, but we pretty much speak the same language. The cultural thing, you see some communities in Kenya and Tanzania have almost same culture, especially along the borders. So there's so many things that you can compare between Tanzania and Kenya, which will take Kenya as an immediate peer to look at when you're doing any comparison. Nigeria is far, far west. You may say Egypt is pretty much a different culture, if you may. South Africa is pretty much different animal in itself. So I think for me, Kenya is an ideal peer to look at when you're building our ecosystem moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Tell us about how people can find you. What are your socials? Where are you located?
I'm very active on my socials. So if you go to, I use my real names, I use my real picture. So if you go to LinkedIn, it's Salum Awadh. If you go to Twitter, it's Salum Awadh. If you go to Instagram, Salum Awadh. So I'm available on all the three main social media platforms. And I try to be as active. It's just to show the world what Tanzania is building, the move that we're making as a country, and to attract people to come and do business here.
Okay. Thank you very much for spending time with us. We hope we can connect with you at a later stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.